I'd like to call to order the Planning and Zoning Committee meeting for September the 10th, 2025. I would like for Representative Tommy Adkins to open us with a word of prayer, remembering a great man, Charlie Kirk.
Let's pray. Dear Lord, we pray that you be with the Kirk family in their time of troubles. We don't know the answers or why things like this happen. But dear Lord, just give them guidance and safety and understanding in their time of need. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Okay, I need to, do we have a motion to approve the minutes from May 6th of 2025?
Motion to approve.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Now we're going to have a discussion. I guess Jonathan's going to lead us in that discussion on the maximum height.
So it's been a minute since we had the height discussion that we had back in May, but you all left us with a motion to bring back what some draft language might look like, resulting from your conversation. So here are edits to two of the tables in the zoning code that I think accomplishes what you were looking for, two different aspects. So the first aspect would be raising the height, the maximum building height in general commercial, as long as it's set back at least 200 feet from a residential lot line. So that's what that amendment would look like in that table, pulling out GC from where it is right now in that row that has OI and LI, so it's its own row, and then adding that additional annotation at the bottom that says they can increase it from 50 to 60 as long as they have that 200-foot setback from the residential lot line. So I think that accomplishes what you all had asked to see at your last meeting. Any questions on the GC going to 60?
Okay, so the chart we have in front of us is different from the chart that's up there.
If you turn to the second page, it's a long table.
Okay. I'm like,
Yeah.
I was trying to figure that one out. Okay. So this is the one that we had talked about,
Yes.
and you just put it into a,
Yeah, so you can see what that amendment would look like if you're interested in bringing that forward to the planning commission and then on the county council for consideration of adoption.
okay, so the maximum height would be 50 feet.
It would be 50 in GC as it is now, but it could go to 60 as long as the building is set back at least 200 feet from the residential lot line.
And we talked about that.
We did, yeah. I think the primary interest in that for GC was based around hotels. Most other uses aren't going to need to go that high. There were some hotels looking to locate in the unincorporated area of Fort Mill that were having some difficulty with the 50-foot limit. So you all were trying to entertain ways to get to 60.
Okay, what do you guys think?
Did this include the, was it part of this height that was about the, if you only did 50%, or was that part of the equipment, accessory
That's the
use?
next one.
Okay.
Yeah. Any questions on the GC height?
Well, I meant for the, okay, that part.
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right.
Okay, so the second part that Mr. Litton was just referring to, he'd asked us to include some language that would exempt rooftop amenities.
Yeah.
And I think I tried to capture what you all were contemplating. I looked through some other zoning codes to try to capture as many similar concepts as I could in the language. So this is what I came up with. Rooftop amenities, recreational areas, or accessory occupiable spaces such as penthouses, roof decks, bars, restaurants, terraces, shade structures, and pools that occupy 25% or less of the roof area would be allowed to go above the height limit. And I added some notes in the height max. There are some suggestions that I think are worthwhile considering. I added in there 15 feet above the roof so that they're not going to try to do multiple stories of a penthouse on top of the roof. They're essentially limited to one. And then also suggesting to add in a 1-to-1 step back from the roof exterior walls so that if you have a penthouse that's over the height limit, it's going to be set away from the edge of the roof a distance equal to the height that they're going above it. So that way it's less visually obtrusive, you have less building mass coming forward. Otherwise, you might end up with a building that is in practical terms and looks 75 feet tall.
So in other words, it's gonna sit in the middle.
That's right.
And,
Any other comments?
Does-
Comments?
Does the, so the 25% is only for the portion that goes above the 60 feet? Or so if you have a bar and a pool, does the pool count as part of the 25%?
I would think we would you could have multiple of those amenities, but in total, they would comprise less than 25% if they were of the rooftop area in order to be exempt from height calculation.
So you couldn't have let's say you got a 100 square foot building. So I was thinking 25 square feet of it would be the bar or restaurant, and then the rest of it could be the patio and or pool or whatever. That's not how this is, because those pieces aren't above the limit, would they have to be a part of the 25%?
Yeah, I think anything that would rise above the roof line would need to be captured in both the percentage and in the types of things that could be up
Right.
there in order to be, in order for staff to understand that, yeah, those are exempt from the maximum roof height calculation. So if you wanted more of the roof area to be used, you want that number to be higher than 25%.
but now let me ask you, if you're gonna have folks stuck up on a roof, does that mean include if they put a fence or railing around it? Most of them have at least a 4-foot setup wall.
Yeah, they would have a parapet wall, yeah.
And then if they put a fence on that,
Is that what you're making reference to?
I'm gonna assume that building code captures things like that. If you've got occupiable space, that you have safety measures in place for your structure,
Just
so that
saying,
people aren't
you
just
got
walking
some-
off.
yeah, you got some quirks out there.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
So if you're happy with what you see, if we could get a vote from the committee to send that on to the planning commission or council or planning
Well,
commission.
tell me this, I can't remember, did we ever settle the thing over the Davison and their house? We settled that, didn't we? Yeah, I thought.
Are you?
And that come under
Well, I just want to make
variance.
sure it's clear.
No, they had their own
This-
height
yeah.
amendment that was passed by council.
I'm just worried that
I
they're
thought
going
we
to
did something. I
put a
couldn't-
restaurant in with a pool, but if the pool is, let's say it's raised 6 inches above the roof or something, does that count in the 25%? Like a rooftop bar?
As long as it don't protrude over that 4-foot parchment wall, it shouldn't matter, should it?
I'm just trying to make sure we're clear on.
So I think how this usually works, like a hotel, it might not be the roof deck, it might not be at like exactly 60 feet. if it's raised to
Right.
60 feet. It might be at like 57 feet, to kind of accommodate 4 or 5 schools. And so let's say the pool is right around that 57, 58, but under that 60. I would think that means it would be exempt because it's at the height limit.
Right.
And the part that would have to stay under 25% would be the parts of the roof that are above that 60, which is probably like the restaurant bar area, the actual structures on the roof. So it would really depend on where that pool and sort of outdoor area, if it's at the above the roof, that 60-foot ceiling of the roof deck or below it. But I could see a scenario where the pool and the kind of the patio area is below the maximum height limit, whereas the amenity area or the restaurant or whatever, that would have a structure, but that structure would be limited to 25% for this code change.
Right, but I just want to make sure that it's clear that if they build first 6 floors to exactly 60 feet, then they put a 25% restaurant bar up there, that the pool, because it has a handrail coming out of it or something like that, doesn't throw the whole thing. You know what I mean? How strict is this thing gonna be?
Well, the parapets and fencing and things like that, and then like utility screening,
Right.
like utility equipment screening on the roof, that would be like exempt in general, so that kind of thing would, I think the concern would be actual structure
Okay.
above that 60.
Yeah, because they got
Yeah.
air conditioning units that are pretty massive.
If it was great, you know, it was,
But the biggest thing I think what Andy's getting to is we already got enough stuff that's left up to the interpretation thereof.
Right.
So we need to,
Yeah, I think just is a good one. It'd be structure based. So if you had like a handrail that came over and that was, 6 inches, that would.
Well, I guess if it's not clear enough, we can always go back and fix it.
I'll bet about that. It takes $3.
Which is my new favorite unit.
Special exception.
Yeah,
Special
Okay.
exception.
that's my favorite unit. Okay, well, do we need a motion?
Yep.
Okay,
Yes, please.
do I have a motion that we accept the building height that we have before us?
Motion to accept the building height, maximum height adjustments, and exceptions to the maximum building height as written by staff.
Second.
Second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
So,
Okay, so next we're gonna talk about, our industrial district uses. Now, this is just, how are you going to, present this?
well, I'll start out at a very high level because I think, the referral to the committee was very broad, just the
Yes.
industrial districts and their uses in general. So I'll just go at a very high level. You've got some pretty long documents there that you can take a look at to give you some context for how you'd like to take the conversation. But essentially, we'll need to talk about, what's the scope of what you're interested in, any potential changes, that sort of thing. But just on a very high level, the 2 documents that Josh just handed out, the one with all the pretty colors, that's the non-residential district use table. So that's got, the 3 districts are in the purple there. RI being rural industrial, LI being light industrial, and ID being industrial development. So those are the 3 districts and the uses therein that this conversation will revolve around. So that should give you an idea of what's allowed in those districts. And I've got up here on the screen what those different letter notations mean in the use table. So there's different categories of their permissiveness in code. P would mean it's permitted, essentially it's by right in the district in which that letter P appears for any particular use. C is a conditional use, meaning there's no special step, no extra step needed to start that use, but any use that is started up in that district needs to abide by a specific set of conditions. And anytime you'll see the C, there's going to be a left-hand column that's going to say use conditions. That's going to tell you the subpart in the zoning code where those conditions could be found, so that someone could quickly go into the use table and say, oh, this use requires conditions. What are those? Okay, here they are. And I'm going to go find what they are. That's the structure of it. SE stands for special exception. So those are uses that might be allowed in the district, but before they could start construction or get approval to establish a use in that district, they would need to get an approval by the Board of Zoning Appeals. And that's a a special exception, it has a public hearing, they need to do a neighborhood meeting. So it is an extra layer of approval that they have to go through. T is temporary use, that's all the way at the bottom of the table. I mostly left that out because there's very few of them, and those are kind of intermittent, and they're not really intensive uses. And any cell in that table that's blank, is empty, that means that use is prohibited in that district. So in the event that somebody wanted to do a particular use on a piece of property and their district didn't allow it, if they really were serious about doing that use on that property, they would have to rezone to a district that does allow it. So that's what the different categories of uses are. The other document that I handed out, I went through the zoning code definitions, of which there are many, 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 and I just pulled out all of the use definitions that are any use that appears in any of the 3 districts that we're talking about in this table. So if you have any question about, well, what is an emergency shelter, or, what is heavy machinery, every use has a definition in the zoning code, so that should help you navigate that. So what we'll need from you all in this discussion is identifying the scope of what you'd like to do in terms of doing any changes, creating a larger scale project for us to work on. Some of the things that came to mind that might be something that you're looking for to either modify the use table from what it looks like today in terms of taking certain uses out of districts, adding uses into districts, that kind of thing. Modifying the use definitions that we have here. I thought it might be important to, if there are any changes, to add process clarity as part of a text amendment. So I think there is some confusion about how the use table works and what the planning department's role is in that, what council's role is in that. So I think adding clarity to the code would be helpful for everybody for that. And I'm sure there are some other goals or issues out there, but those were just the first 3 that came to mind that you might want to talk about. But after that, I'll turn it over to you, Chairwoman.
Okay, so, I would like to see what on this new, now this is, are there new stuff in here?
No, there's nothing new.
stuff in
That is all contemporary code.
Just this one?
Both documents.
They're just what we have right now?
That's right.
Okay, so nothing has been changed?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so you want us to take a look and see and ask these 4 questions of ourselves, or?
Yeah, the simple question for staff is, what would you like us to do? What would you like us to take a look at? What's the scope of what you would like us to bring back to you to consider?
Okay. So that's homework.
Yeah, I mean, you can
Or
certainly
do you
start
want
the
us to
discussion
talk
now about what
I
you're
mean,
thinking
I
about.
don't know, are y'all prepared to talk about anything tonight? I was just waiting to see
They'll figure it out.
what was gonna happen. I didn't know how this was gonna proceed. I personally don't have a lot of problems with our code as it stands right now. I'm just gonna jump out and say that.
Okay.
So, I'm sure that that's gonna be debated. But, anyway, do you have something you wanna talk about tonight, or you wanna look this over and get some?
I had just a couple, so that they at least have a plan or a place to go. The first thing, and it kind of ties in with item number 2, which was maximum heights. I thought we were putting ID and LI in maximum height along with the GC, because we couldn't solve it during the data center portion. So we were going to talk about getting those heights up in the industrial areas.
No, no, I didn't know that. I was very specific on GC.
You
I
said we
did
were
not
going to
know
hold
that.
it until
Yeah,
we were only going to approve data centers.
yeah, and that's all.
Right.
That I'm
For
interested
then,
in.
but now, we're talking about,
That's all I'm
Industrial.
interested in. That's all I'm interested in. Now, you might be interested in some more things, and you can talk about that, but I am not interested in that at all.
I mean, you remember that conversation?
Vaguely, I do remember.
That we were
And
gonna
did you
get
remember me
industrial?
saying no?
Yes, that's why we went on.
Exactly.
Because we were postponing it.
Yeah, we were
to-
postponing it, yeah. but-
To get
Because
rid
I
of the data
said I
center.
was not interested in anything but the data center and then the hotel situation. That was the two things that we were talking about.
Well,
I mean, Karen can look back on the meeting or whatever, we can look at the meeting, but I have never been interested in going, having a talk about.
do we have to have a motion for this?
Let me ask you something,
Are
John.
you okay with that, Tommy?
Let's hear what they got to say.
On grain elevators and all, 'cause some of them get pretty expensively high. Where would they play in part in the zone?
Agricultural features.
It's an agricultural feature, it's exempt already.
Okay. I mean, we can open up for discussion, but I don't understand what was we,
Because why would we allow data centers to be higher but not allow other industrial
I think it's gonna have to
facilities
be,
that need to have that extra height also? Why would we give them all the same ability? Why just one company?
or you could go
Or use.
to a special exception.
what I
Yes.
Can't get a variance out of it. That's not a variance type thing.
Not variance, but special
So
exception.
it's not.
Why would that not be?
No, I think I heard you all debating whether additional height could be granted by a special exception or a variance. And Mr. Litton's right, it's not really the kind of thing that the board should grant a variance approval for, because the state has very specific criteria.
Oh.
They need to prove that there's a hardship that's unique to your particular property. And so lot shape and things like that, those tend to help with, lot sizes and things like that, that the board can take a look at. But it's really almost impossible to prove that there's a hardship unique to your property that wouldn't let you go higher than everybody else can, right?
Okay, so
And
how
by
many?
special exception, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, but the special exception, that applies specifically to allowing uses. So you couldn't get additional standard like height by a special exception. It would have to be with the use table.
Okay, so how many businesses or whatever have you had that were not able to come in here because of the height, other than the data center and hotels?
Nothing comes to mind.
You could potentially have an issue, and I'll use Fort Mill for example.
I can't hear.
You could potentially have an issue, and I'll use Fort Mill for an example. If you were to have a development that incorporated, 2 or 3 office buildings that wanted to go 8 stories tall, office could be something that you might want to consider in that. I would say hotels, obviously, on the industrial side, I can tell you at least what we see. The minimum probably starts on a regional case about 30 feet. We've seen up to 50, 60 feet in some cases.
But you can go 60.
I mean, we've seen requests on that end. I'll be honest with you, that probably centers more towards like distribution that has high racking. It's probably more fitting with that.
Yeah.
Or if there's special equipment that's gonna go into a building like a press, that, is a certain size.
You can go special exception.
We can't do a special exception.
You
just
can
said
go
you can't.
special exception.
You just said no. you
No,
can't.
that was on variance.
No, you said on
Yeah,
uses.
so also they cannot get a special exception for height. A special exception would have to be something that appears in the use table as an SE. It's tied to uses and not standards like height.
And there are some presses, but
Yeah, I mean, you could have a very large scale manufacturer that has a huge press in there as part of their production line that, may need a certain clear height.
grains too.
And you don't have people coming in to get this because they already know you can't get there. So they're looking at surrounding, if you look at the ordinances and you can't build what you need to build, why would you even go to that county to even ask them? You just find a county nearby, like Lancaster County, and you
So
go
what
there.
are, can you do a deep dive on the counties around us and let us know what's going on with them, like you've done before?
Essentially, the paperwork you gave us for the data center.
Yeah, so, I don't know, we got around to answering the process question, but I think, you know, the discussion around height in industrial districts would have to be referred to the committee officially. So maybe that's something in your next report out that you could request that be referred to committee. And then I'd just bring back the same table that we discussed before when data centers came
Well,
up.
I'll go one better. Mitch, would you be capable of giving us some different examples of companies that could possibly need that?
Yeah, I could probably even ask around to some other counties in terms of projects, opportunities, if they have any specific examples in our region that we can point to where, you know, they needed something above 60 for a project. Might be helpful.
And Josh, just provided me another suggestion. You all just voted to send on changes to the building height table. And that's exactly the discussion that you'd like to have is changes other than the ones that were in blue.
Yep.
So if you want to revisit the vote that you just took to ask to see some alternatives for the other districts, that would be another path to take process-wise.
Well, we'll run it through and have it referred back. I think that would be we'll do it the clean way instead of trying to haul stuff. If the rest of the council doesn't care, then we'll let it out. The issues I have in industrial is requiring trade services and construction services only be in the rural industrial, light industrial, or industrial uses. And then, because what we're getting is things like landscape supply, which there's a little bit of a conflict in here. We have landscape supply facilities on the second page, fifth one down from the top, but under definitions, landscaping is under trade services, so I'm not sure that they're,
There is a landscape,
Grass cutting and the mulch yards, yes.
right, so is a mulch yard a landscape supply, or is it a landscaping?
Would be more of a landscape supply.
It would be a landscape supply, so that one, you don't have to be in an ID for that.
yeah, so it's like,
Well, I hope
like
not.
Jeff was mentioning, so if you've got a retail component, people are showing up all day long to buy your stockpile materials, you gotta do landscape supplies.
Okay. Does that apply to the greenhouses and nurseries also? If you've got a retail component of that?
I don't believe those need a retail component.
Because I'm thinking about some of those places you can, you walk in, you buy your plants, but they're called greenhouses or nurseries. And some of those are allowed in GC.
So typically the greenhouses and nurseries that are gonna fall under that category, they're growing the product on site, like fast growing trees in Fort Vale, that's a good example. I don't think they sell on site, do they?
Depends on, I mean, they have product on site, but they have to deliver, and have distribution there.
Yeah, so it's gonna be more about cultivating the products to sell for a greenhouse or a nursery.
Well, what about Wilson's, downtown in Rock Hill? Don't they grow on site and
Yeah.
they sell
And sell,
and do all of that?
and Lead Nursery grows on site and has stockpile.
That one might be a hybrid. So, yeah, these uses, like, once they start looking for like a Frankenstein of different uses, then someone would have to write us a letter, like, this is what we're doing, and then we figure out, you know, which is the best, which is the primary use.
Mhm.
Because it might be primarily retail based on, you know, what the business looks like, and maybe they're growing some of it outside, or maybe it's the inverse, depending on the type of business and what it looks like. But, yeah, so that's how it gets nuanced very quickly, when it looks like a Franken use, and then we gotta figure out which one it is and how to categorize it.
But going back to the main, backing up again, because I've been off on this tangent, is the construction services. So the guy that came in for his HVAC service, he was having to have light industrial or an industrial use to be able to do that. Now, why wouldn't something like that be allowed in a general commercial type, something, because it's not a very intensive use, it's just got things sitting there, and we've had quite a few of those rezonings so far this year, of people that needed to just store their trucks or whatever on the site, but yet we're having to move them into industrial or light industrial in places that doesn't need to have those things, and we don't want to get something like that started. Is there a
Yeah.
way to move
Yeah, you could think
construction
about.
services into GC?
Well, so I'll.
Services is a larger one, it's probably more like trade service. Because
Right.
then we have either, you have one that had no outdoor storage, meaning it's stored pretty much everything inside, obviously vehicles, but not like equipment or like storage yards.
Mhm.
Or do the trade service where it's limited to 5,000 square feet outdoor storage or less. And that's a different, and the construction services is like unlimited outdoor
Right.
storage, and that's why it's the ID can be, you know, on heavy equipment or construction service. Is that how?
Yeah, and I will say that prior to maybe 2023,
Mhm.
all of those trades, they were lumped in with construction services. So
Right.
It captured them too, so they were only allowed an ID, never mind LI. So I mean, that's when we had a couple of those come forward and we said, well, you know, exactly to your point, it doesn't make sense to put all those smaller operators, the tradies,
Mhm.
that aren't going to be as impactful, to put all of those in ID. That didn't make a whole lot of sense, so that's why we brought a text amendment to council and saying, you know, why don't we create a new use, trade services, and allow that in light industrial also. So you could take that a step further if you wanted. To Jeff's point, I would caution about moving construction services into the other districts, because those are
Well-
much more impactful. You got all the dirt haulers and all that big heavy equipment that could potentially be on site. And they could be many, many acres.
Right.
But how does that fall when there's multiple farms that also do dirt work?
Well, if they're farms, they're farms. It's a,
But I'm saying that also own clearing businesses too, park heavy equipment on their farms.
so you're saying that they would have a grading company in addition to the farm on the same site?
Yeah.
Well,
Because I mean, I'm not wanting to make them be industrial, I mean,
yeah, I mean, when it comes to these things, it's about scale and intent. If, you know, someone is they've got a bulldozer and they primarily use it to, you know, clear areas for cultivation on their own property, but maybe sometimes they're helping somebody out and they've got a small LLC that do some small grading work, then that's, you know, probably accessory to what's going on the farm. But if you've got a true company and a bulk of the business is grading and going out and doing subdivisions and roads and that kind of thing, you probably have a construction services use on ag property.
but they can do it.
I don't have the benefit of ag.
Well, I mean, I don't
here,
think
but-
I mean, a lot of this stuff bothers me because I own land and I've bought land and worked hard to pay for land. And I know the intent, whenever you get aggravated, that you spend all this money and then you can't use your property the way you intended.
Yeah, that's the balance of zoning, is trying to balance individual property rights to do what you want with your property versus everyone else's right to look at what you're doing. So that's all zoning is balancing those two concepts.
Oh, believe me, Tom, me and you've had that discussion about anonymous reporting and all that, ain't it? Because I think you should own up any time that you've got a beef with somebody.
Well, if that's the case, and talking about those types of uses, along with the smaller trade services and having outdoor storage. So I was looking at like building material and supply stores, farm and garden supply, and equipment sales and service. You know, they'll have stuff outside uncovered, but there's not a limit how much space they can have. They're allowed in the GC. Could we move trade services to a GC? Would that have helped some of our rezonings? Like the one out on McConnell's Highway,
Yeah.
the pressure washer guy that had to go into an industrial zoning. I mean, it was rural industrial, but
Yeah, we can take a look at that and see what the impacts might be, so you can consider it. I think, traditionally those contractors that are doing trades, they might look at a light industrial park. It looks like a strip center, but with all the signage, and the people that are going there aren't showing up to buy stuff. They're, they do their office, and they might have some of their vehicles that go out into the field to do their work. So they tend to co-locate. So they might not fit as well with other GC users per se, but that doesn't mean the scale of what it looks like and the impact of what it looks like might not be fairly similar. So we can take a look and show you what that
But
might
I
be.
mean,
but that's where the
I know a bunch
landscaping
of-
standards and stuff
Yeah.
belong, at least.
because I know a bunch of businesses that do multiple things to make a dollar.
We're just trying to help
I
out
don't
people
wanna
that are buying out
Deter
closed
no
down businesses.
entrepreneurship whatsoever. Which I'm one to kind of mind my own business a lot of times on.
But that was my main thing, was trying to get these guys that are doing small trade services type of stuff, not having to go through a rezone. They can use an existing commercial facility and do their work there.
And to your point, that has come up in rezonings last one they used to.
So, y'all could look at that, report back.
Okay. So, you good?
Yep.
Tommy, you got anything else you want to bring up?
Well, there's a lot I could bring up,
Well,
but I'm
no, we
all
are
right.
going to come back to the table and bring more things.
Yeah.
It's just that this is a start, and we'll, so as we think of things, is it appropriate that we contact you and let you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, that'd be the best thing.
Yeah, I think so. And I don't know when you plan on scheduling the next committee meeting. So depending on how much time you want to space that out, we can either start working on stuff as you email us and let us know what you're interested in, or you could just compile a list and then we can all talk about it as a group at the next meeting and take next steps. Well, we can go at your pace.
I mean,
What would you rather do, compile a list as we email things into them, and they bring it back to us at the
That's
next?
fine for me.
what are
Would be
the,
just-
the chances if we adopt this? Have y'all looked over this well enough to see if we're gonna put older businesses and whatnot in a non-conforming aspect?
Yeah, that's always something that you want to consider when you're making changes to the use table. If you change uses, how they're defined, something that fell into one bucket now falls into another, or if you take a certain use out of a district that was allowed before, or you make it a special exception, those become, the ones that are existing become non-conforming to some degree. Most of the time, that doesn't matter, it doesn't impact them, they're already there, they're not gonna expand or do anything else like that. And you all just changed the code to allow for non-conforming uses to have some reasonable expansions. But if someone was gonna double the size of their building or significantly increase their footprint, they might have to rezone before they can do that, depending on what pending changes you might have.
Sound like we need to discuss this.
Well, contrary to that, if they added, like Andy was saying, to a different district, that might make something that's currently non-conforming conform to a certain.
Right. Yeah, I'm not looking to remove any uses, I just wanted to add, really, that trade services to GC is the only real major change.
Okay, so let's do some emailing, let them compile, then you come back. Is that good with y'all?
Yeah, ma'am.
No.
Yeah, let's do that.
Standing time. Okay, so let's see what we got here next. Wall signs, my favorite subject.
Oh,
I love wall signs. We've
Okay.
only talked about it, is this our fourth time to talk about it?
I was only here for one, but it was a while ago.
I think
Maybe it was last year, I
it's
think it was.
at least three. And I think tonight could be two.
And I have
Oh, no,
no
this is
problem
different
with
than,
that.
Oh, really? It's
Yeah, I think you're thinking of, what, the sign, tables with the temporary signs, yes. I think you're thinking about the temporary signs, the wall signs, we had discussed one other time. I don't think the other two gentlemen were on, committee at that time. We had put it on pause to push through on the rural zoning project, and so now we're revisiting it to discuss with the old business.
So we're gonna circle back around.
So, we did have a discussion a while ago about wall signs. Provided this list at that time, which is just comparison to other jurisdictions. A lot of variety out there with signs in general, wall signs specifically. But we did take away from that meeting that, the committee was interested in maybe removing the limitation of one wall sign fixture per wall, and just allow multiple fixtures of signage, but with the limitation of the maximum sign area to make it simpler for businesses with multiple signage as part of their, whether they have a logo and a separate like text sign, or there is an already allowance in the code to allow multiple suites to have different signs, but it would sort of extend that out to even individual businesses that maybe have, I guess an example would be like the Walmart might have Walmart, and they'll have Garden Center, they'll have grocery. There are three different signs, but it's one wall plane. So that could be difficult with the one, just allowing the one wall sign per wall. So that was an interest. And the other thing from the committee we talked about was possibly changing the max wall sign area per wall. Because larger buildings, it was maxed out at 200 square feet. Building is 400 feet in length, or maybe larger. 200 square feet is a big sign on a very small wall, but it's not a very big sign, which we'll see on a larger wall. And then you might have the same thing where if it's a maximum sign area, if you have multiple suites, if the total area, each suite just gets a portion of it, then you can kind of cap out that 200 square feet, with those multiple signs pretty fast on a larger building. This is most have to do with larger structures. So we've come up with some options. The first one's pretty straightforward, just taking out the restriction on one wall sign per wall. Just putting it in the table, there's the allowance there's no max. Or just striking out completely, just kind of noting that. And instead of the maximum number of maximum number of wall signs, we just based on what that cap is for that wall, based on its on the maximum wall area. Or if the wall if the wall plane is not up to the maximum allowance, then whatever it says. So if it's a 100-foot long wall, the maximum sign area will be 100 feet. But it could be multiple wall sign fixtures. It doesn't limit to one fixture, basically. And so that's the first recommendation, or first option, I guess you'd say. We also looked at possibly alternatives to how we calculate the wall sign area. For the most part, we, I guess in the code forever, it's been 1 square foot of wall sign message area for every 1 foot of wall width. Again, 40-foot wall, 40 square feet of signage. It's pretty straightforward. It works for the most part. But there are buildings that are large, but especially if we're talking about building height, and we were talking about that, piece of building height, you might have and we'll see one, a higher building, not very wide, not like a big shopping center or a big warehouse, it's very, hundreds of feet long, but is tall. And that can be a little bit more restrictive for them, and so there's an option of, and we looked at, again, other comparisons, some other jurisdictions use the percentage, is possibly adding that 5% as an option. You can either do the 1 square foot of a sign for every foot of your wall width, or the 5%, whatever's larger, that's going to be your max. And that's a possible option. And another thing we looked at possible options is just increasing the maximum wall area, sign area for a wall, up to 400 square feet. That's just pretty straightforward. 200 square feet has been standard, but once you get over a building that's like 300 feet wide, 400 feet wide, even wider, that 200 square foot sign or signs total, you get smaller and smaller in comparison, which again I have some demonstrations. So these are possible options that we could do to upgrade our wall sign regulations without changing, a lot of the charts and stuff too much, adding a bunch of complications to it. This is maybe an updated chart to look like. Again, the number of max signs per wall, none, or we could just strike it out from the column. And the other possible option was we keep the 1 square foot for every 1 foot, but we also add the or for the 5%. And then whatever the max would be up to the 400, get to the next one, up to the maximum allowance area. And the last one is the max sign area per wall, raise it up to 400. Again, that means you have to hit a 400-foot wide building or have an area 5% or more that qualifies for that 400 square feet to even get there. Your smaller buildings are not going to even get to that max, even with an aggregate of all their tenants and not all that. So here's an example. This is a shopping center. It's up by TK. And each tenant has a sign. They're all different sizes, but they're probably like everything from 20 to 30 square feet, each individual one. That whole section of shopping center is about 350 feet. So the aggregate of all of them is probably around 350 feet or so, right? Just because each suite gets their own little sign. So this would just clear up. This has been existing for a while. This would just make that, that's obviously fine, because it's under the maximum. And I've looked at the other shopping centers, not just this one, and a lot of the buildings, we have big warehouses, which we talked about as well, but a lot of your retail shopping centers, even the big, Walmarts, the big box stores, they might be 500, 600 feet. It's a lot easier to work within, the 400 square feet total than 200 square feet total on that big building. And this would actually capture a majority of your mid-sized commercial structures, residential, even like smaller warehouses and industries. So this is just an example. This is FedEx building over by the Carolines area, Lakemont. And that's the sign they have. They're not putting a big advertising sign. I just use it because the wall length is pretty good, for example, because it's about 350 feet, that wall plane. And their sign is, I can't remember exact size, but it was way smaller than the 200 square feet maximum. But just to give you kind of scale, if it were to kind of scale it up to 200 or 400 up to the maximum for this wall, which is about 350 square feet. It gets bigger, but it doesn't get, massively bigger. If it's 4 times larger, it's still scaled to the wall. And again, that's a little bit smaller than even the 400 square foot max. Here's just another example. This is the side of the building. This one's a little closer to 400. I couldn't find one that was actually 400 feet in length exactly. But this is fairly close. I think like 370 something is what I got the measurement off it. And I just had to put a scale. That's the 200 square foot sign. So it's not bad, but if it was far away from the road, it'd be kind of hard to read. And you can see it's pretty small in comparison to that wall. And that's not even the biggest wall for this building, that's the side wall. That's a 400 square foot option. You can see it's a little bit more visible. It's still not huge in the wall, it's still not, but that's like the max. And it could be, have two, if this was a different kind of wall, and have two different tenants in that, and they could each share the 200 square feet. So it could function like that without being, I don't think it would hurt anything to go that level. Because you still have to have a large building. This is just for example, if we didn't have the cap for the 400 square feet and you just hit 5%, now you get a pretty big sign. If it didn't have that ceiling on that 5%, you get kind of large. So it might be too much, just for example. This is an example we literally just got in. It's the best example I've seen in all my years here as far as the 5% rule. This part of this hotel is maybe 60 some feet wide. The existing sign up there is 100 some, can't remember exactly what it is, feet. I think it was based at the time it was when it was ever permitted. It's been a long time. It's been there for a while. Maybe based on the total width of the building, including the side part where the restaurant is. But it's very tall. I think it's like 11 stories or something like that, 10, 11 stories. So that's what they proposed, a larger sign, calling in, spoiler alert. But that 200, I did the calculation based on what I could, they didn't provide it, but I kind of could figure it out from the measurements. That 256 square foot sign that they want, it wouldn't be allowed with our current standard, with just the 1-for-1, but it would fall into that 5%, that's right around that max. And this is probably one of the best examples, just came in. See, because it doesn't come a whole lot. There's not a lot of, most buildings are wider than they are tall, but sometimes it does come in. Hotels will be one of the prime examples. And so the options is we can, leave the wall sign limitation as it is, or we can have an option of limit wall signs to a portion of wall length or area instead of limiting the one sign per wall. So eliminating that rule for the one sign per wall. Then another option, I guess 2A, is increase the max sign area per wall square feet from 200 square feet up to that 400 square feet. Again, you have to have a larger building to even get to there. You also have an option 2B to add the 5% facade area option to the existing 1 square foot assigned for the 1 foot of wall area, whatever is greater, up to that 400 square feet. So it gives the applicant the option. Probably most of them will still take the 1-for-1, but every once in a while you have a suite that's kind of narrow. But they have a fair amount of face area and the 5% is going to be more full. Or the hotel example where it's very tall. And option 2C, to increase the max above 400 square feet, limit to buildings 100 square foot or more. And that's if the committee would want you to go above that 400. I guess our suggestion would be only for buildings that 100 total, 100,000 square foot or more, which is kind of in line with where having a ground sign. You get that larger sign when you get over that 100 that's scaled up, and that would be that kind of idea that only on the largest buildings would we even suggest maybe, or at least recommend to go over that 400 square feet that we put as an option. That's it. Oops. Any questions?
So the current limit is one wall sign, 200 square foot.
Right.
And that's, so the strip mall in PKK is currently in non-conformance, correct?
The strictest interpretation, when it was built
Right,
The
but-
code was, so they just replaced it one for one. But it could be an issue, and this is what we're looking at, for newer developments where we have to decide, like, these are the amount of wall signs we can have for this new shopping center.
Right, so if they wanted to build that same thing today, not, that one was built and already done, but if they built the same thing today, they couldn't have all those units with wall signs. for
Yeah,
all of them.
if you looked at the total, that 200 square foot max,
Mhm.
that would be like a limitation for us to say that approval, because it's supposed to be max for all the signs, right?
Right, and then the number of them obviously blows it up also.
So they're not large signs, but they add up.
Right. Do we get a lot of problems with signs? I assume there are.
I would say the one wall sign per wall has been an issue. We've had a couple, had to change things or something like that. The size has not been an issue, 'cause you have to deal with the larger buildings, but we do have some large buildings coming in who have asked about having over that 200 square foot. So it's not a huge issue because you don't have big buildings. Not every building, like the FedEx, not every large warehouse wants a large sign. But just from a scale standpoint, it's just, that 200 square feet can look real small depending on the size of the building.
Right.
And we always encourage staff to take a look as they're doing their reviews. If there's problems that keep occurring, that seems like it either doesn't make sense, or it's a recurring problem that they keep hearing about from developers or builders, that please bring that to our attention, and we'll try to vet it as a group and bring it to you all for amendment. So this is one that Jeff has found himself.
Do you have any examples of things that we want to avoid? Like, did anybody go out there and make up essentially a NASCAR sponsor wall? And we don't want to allow, there's a reason that this
Right.
ordinance was written as strict as it is, because we were trying to stop something. Do we know where that is or what it is that we tried to stop?
I mean, they've been in place longer than 200 square foot maximum. I guess the ones I know that did get variances, and this is before my time, but they did get variances, is like a Shutterfly on 77, that's a very large sign.
Right.
And like the Bass Pro Shop, I think they're up to like, years ago they got a variance for wall signs up to 600 square feet. But those are exceptions. I mean, we haven't run into a lot of them. I've had a couple warehouses where they split the warehouse into multi-tenants, and they were like, I got 75 for my tenant instead of 100, something like that. It's not been a huge issue. We've had a lot of variances for it. So I mean, I won't say that it would resolve a couple of existing non-conforming, or allow some options for some larger buildings or maybe upcoming projects. But as far as like a negative example, I mean, the negative example or negative possibility is to just get a larger sign on a wall. So, I mean, it doesn't have to be a larger wall though.
Right.
Qualify.
Well, like I was saying, I didn't want to see, or was there a place that had like 10 signs, but they're all 10 square feet each or 20 square feet
Yeah.
each or something like that? Is there something, it just makes it look,
We haven't had that level of like abuse or
Okay.
that thing, but I mean, you could if you don't have a maximum number. You could have something like that. It's just not been the norm for
Okay.
most businesses.
Yeah, and to your point, all of this stuff comes about because someone went a little bananas.
Right.
And the perfect example I always think of is Sparky's on the way to the beach. You can
Yeah.
barely see that building, but for all the signs on it, plus all the yard signs, and
Yeah.
that's crazy. So people will do that kind of stuff, so that's how you end up with this
Mhm.
regulation. But I think adopting something like this is going to keep everybody within the range of
Okay.
reasonableness. And for the most part, people want customers to come to their space and they want it to look nice too. So a lot of, your national chains, they know everyone's got a sign code, so they have something that is typically going to fall into whatever everyone has.
I just worry about the DIYer that goes out
Yeah.
there and,
Gets real creative.
It still would be, some limitation, like
Okay.
5%.
I've got
so
no
5% of that
Leave it
wall,
as
that whole
is,
face of the
or-
wall.
No,
So it's still
change it.
not,
Change it to
Okay.
3.
I think,
You want to change it to 2?
But which part, A, B, or C, I was thinking two B.
And they're not mutually exclusive, so you could do two A, B, and C, or you could do two A and B.
So it looks like A is included in B, right?
Yeah, you could also, if you didn't want to include it up to 400, you could have B, but set it the existing 200. So there's a couple of different ways to slice it.
What do you guys think you could work with the best?
I think as Jeff went through the presentation, I think we demonstrated by those visuals that sometimes 200 is hard to work with for those larger buildings. And as long as we're keeping it as a proportion of the building, it'll be fine to go to 400 because the smaller buildings just can't get there by virtue of the ratio. And I think having the 5% is helpful for taller buildings because they just don't have the width to achieve the same size sign. And you know, they'll have that same ratio and it still looks pretty reasonable.
So, number 2 with A, B, and C.
I think our suggestion is definitely B, 2B, and A and B. And if you wanted even more signage than that, you could contemplate C, but I don't know that we have a bunch of folks clamoring to go over 400, but it's not impossible.
What's your thought, Nick?
My thought? As it relates to that, I would probably defer to Jonathan. I'm gonna say this, I told Tom I wasn't gonna say it, but I guess I'm gonna say it now. And y'all could probably correct me on this. I think about Baxter Village, the white building in Baxter Village that has multiple signs to represent small businesses. Quality development, would it restrict having 3 signs on that building?
Baxter's its own animal.
See, I knew y'all may probably
It
get
is kind of its own thing.
They have their own zoning code.
Yeah, they have their own district. It's not very specific on the signage, but most of the signage we look at is what's existing right there. That would probably almost be a separate discussion, because Baxter maybe needs its own discussion about its signage, if it ever became an issue. Right now, it's kind of recycled. New tenant comes in, they just change up the face. Not a whole lot of big changes since I've been here.
I think as long as there's opportunities that if you were to look at, you know, I can point to probably 2 tracks and think, wow, this could be something that could have a mixed use type development come in and could be Baxter Village type. If it's its own special district, it makes all the
Yeah.
sense in the world to me.
And we still, this won't capture every sign issue that any development would have. We still have master sign plans, we still have variances. We're just looking to maybe capture these existing nonconformities or new developments that were within these kind of bounds where they're like the 400, 500 width, and they need to break that sign area up, or at least have a sign that's visible from the road, give that size of wall, things like that.
I could think of just a couple other examples too. Britex up in Fort Mill, they're trying to sublease part of that building because they've downsized their operation. So, you know, another tenant comes into that building and they want to put a sign up. How do you kind of distinguish that?
Well, yeah, in that case, and I know what you're talking about, and so, I don't know, I can't remember what size the sign they have now. Let's just say they have a 200 square foot sign for their business, that's what's there. They could keep that one and just have, if we did the, I guess, 2B, they could add another 200 square foot sign for that tenant, because that's a very long time, that's a very big building, that's way
That's a
over
very big
100 feet length, I can't remember what it is, but it's maybe 800 or more, I can't remember. So they would definitely get the max. And let's, again, I'd have to go look at it, but let's say they wouldn't even touch their sign with this change. And they just add our 200 square foot sign, they both look pretty small on that wall.
Probably.
Yeah. But readable, but not huge.
And for what it's worth, I would favor B2.
Thanks for answering those questions for me. That's really helpful.
Let's see, give anybody heartburn.
Yeah?
No? All right. You ready for a motion?
Sure, go for it. I want to move this thing on.
All right, motion to recommend, item, option 2, B and C, as presented to the committee.
Second.
Second, okay. All in favor?
Uh,
Okay, so our last discussion will be regarding the Lake Wiley overlay.
Right, so Josh is going to hand out a printed version of the entire Lake Wiley Overlay District standards. And just to give you a sense of the geography, this is everything that constitutes the Lake Wiley Overlay is inside of that orange line there. And the overlay content, there's a lot of text in there, but it's really essentially these 7 things. So I'll cover them just in generalities. You've got the text in front of you. Happy to go through any of it in greater detail. And then I'll turn it over to the chair, Mr. Litton, who made the motion for this item. But the content in there has the use separation that you all amended about a year ago, year and a half. The driveway spacing, essentially it tries to make sure that new driveways that are cut onto public roads meets SCDOT's ARMS manual, and there's thresholds in there that when a parcel is going under redevelopment or additions, that they need to remove existing curb cuts that don't meet those standards, so there's thresholds for that. The third one in there, the landscape section is kind of an odd one. The reasons for the landscape section are longer than the actual regulations. I think it's just one paragraph, but kind of an odd way to do it. But essentially all that section does is require screening for trash, so your dumpsters and things like that, and metal siding. And then there's residential standards, development standards for single-family detached, single-family attached, and multifamily. A lot of those get into how do you design a subdivision, and how do you make it not look like a cookie cutter community where every house is the same, that type of thing. And then the last thing in there is signs. There's a couple of things in there in the overlay district language itself, but I also wanted to make you aware that the Lake Wiley overlay district constitutes its own sign district in the sign code. So, any changes that you would make to Lake Wiley overlay, if it involves signs, we'd have to also change the sign chapter just to make you aware.
So the idea is looking at this, why wouldn't we apply these same standards to the whole entire county? If we want quality development in Lake Wiley, why don't we want quality development throughout the whole county? And so looking through these, I didn't see why these had to be specifically only for that large Lake Wiley area, when like the driveway spacing. I mean, that should be for the whole entire county. So then you take that out of this thing. Landscape screening of trash and metal siding. Why is that not for the whole county? I mean, it really isn't that much. It's not a big deal, but why isn't it just part of the landscaping? So you exit that one out. By the time you get through a lot of this, there's nothing left of the ordinance that that we're trying to solve. The use separation is under a lawsuit currently, and is only between 2 uses. And so those uses are car repair and a car wash. Well, why wouldn't you want a car wash beside, so at Pet Boys, having a car wash right beside it would make more sense than putting it beside the fast food restaurant or having it beside the gas station. So I'm trying to make this, and when we were talking about the sign ordinance, or maybe it was the accessory structure. Well, let's go back to the sign ordinance. I believe when the temporary signs were changed, that wiped out the Lake Wiley overlay out of that section. I thought they decided to
The
approve it.
the differences between them, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, if we're just gonna have the whole county for that, so there's another section that's the same through the county. So we get down to just the residential standards portion, and so, one, why wouldn't we have those same standards throughout the county? And so this is the part I would like for y'all to research. I don't expect an actual answer right now, but I would like to say, why wouldn't we have these standards through the whole entire county? And some of them are very strict, it seems like the 14 inches slabs have to be 14 inches above the ground. I don't see where that adds anything other than cost, but when you have to specifically call out that this does not prohibit slabs, it seems like you're trying to prohibit slabs when you're trying to say, oh, well, we're not doing this. But when I go through what I consider nice developments in the Lake Wiley area, like Paddler's Cove, Tullamore, even my own house, I mean, we don't have 14 inches. I mean, that would just add up the cost. And then the alleyway requirement for lots that are 60 feet and smaller. So I was measuring on GIS yesterday. A lot of those newer subdivisions are right at 60 feet. You know, if they were a foot smaller, you'd have to have an alleyway, which the county is not going to take over, so it adds even more cost to the housing, along with HOA fees to maintain it. So it's not helping with our affordable housing whatsoever. So I would like to see how we can assist to make sure that we're making good for everybody and not just adding unnecessary requirements. And to get back to the point of the accessory buildings, you know, we talked about it makes it complicated. You gotta look at this section and this section, make sure this section complies with these sections. And so if we can make it easier on y'all, you know, I would really prefer that. Now, if there's a very specific reason that Lake Wiley should have something special, but from just these couple of pages, I don't see that.
Yeah, the easy answer to that question is everything that's in here, other than the stuff that's a lot older, was added into the overlay as an implementation of the Lake Wiley Small Area Plan. A list of recommendations in there. And so all of those over time have been added to the code specific to the overlay for Lake Wiley, because they are coterminous, the study area for that, and the Lake Wiley overlay itself, the district overlay. But to your point, that doesn't mean that some of these things can't also be good for the county. So one of the things in the strategic plan is to take a look at applying residential standards countywide. So the implication is there is to take the stuff that's in the Lake Wiley overlay and apply it countywide. So we've talked internally, creating milestones for those on essentially take what's worked and what is working in the Lake Wiley overlay about those residential standards. And to your other point, they are pretty strict and they are difficult for some builders to navigate. Especially when you've got the big national builders that they've got one design or 6 or 7 designs and they don't deviate.
Right.
And so when they come in and they have to hire an architect to do a completely different design, that might take a while. And they'll get frustrated and they'll do it. So that's how you end up with different products at the end of the day. But it is an extra step. It is onerous. They've got to go through that process. So if we were to take those residential standards out of the Lake Wiley overlay and apply them countywide, they would certainly be watered down to some degree from what they are. But to your point about the driveway spacing, I mean, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. That roads are roads, so that certainly makes sense. The use separation is a tricky one. That came specifically out of the small area plan there. I don't know if that necessarily would have the same kind of countywide desire for that. Not sure about that one. And the landscaping of trash and metal siding, you know,
Right.
you know, why would it be needed in one area and not necessarily another? So yeah, if the ask from the committee, and if you could help us fixate on a scope and a go-do,
Yeah.
if the ask is to, you know, can we convert or bring back a proposal to convert much or all of the Lake Wiley overlay to county-wide standards, we can do that. So I don't know if that is the ask. It sounds like that's
That
what
was
you're getting
essentially,
at. Yeah.
the reason being is, you know, we can rewrite this whole thing, but if you're gonna go through that much effort, why not just, and we're looking for good things throughout the entire county, why not just apply it countywide? So that's what I'm looking for there. Because that's, like I said, by the time you take some of those out, there's nothing left, it's be 3 pages long or something. And looking at the existing housing thing that we think, you know, is good developments in Lake Wiley, doesn't comply with any of that. You know, if we tore down every house that was in Lake, you know, anything that didn't comply with that, there wouldn't be anything left. And there's some really nice developments in there, really nice places. So.
So what are you asking for them to do?
They're gonna, well, I'll try to shoot y'all an email, but just saying, yes, see about applying that countywide.
Yeah. And just to make sure we've got consensus, because that is going to be a pretty big lift, a
Yes.
pretty big effort. So I want to make sure we have consensus of the committee. If you don't mind taking a vote on that before we start taking a deep dive on that.
You okay with that?
Please, Tony. And
I don't know, I need to read with some, I mean, y'all know me, I wouldn't live.
okay, so why, if this worked for Lake Wiley, why haven't you done this in the past, countywide?
Well, like I said, a lot of these provisions came out of the Lake Wiley Small Area Plan specifically, so those recommendations were to do X, Y, Z things in the overlay district and not countywide. And it's actually served, I think, we might call it a laboratory of government, if you're familiar with that term. Some state will typically start out with a policy and all the other states try to follow along what's going on there and see if they want to do it in their state. So similar concept could be applied here. There's a lot of new zoning content in the Lake Wiley overlay. Some things were maybe a little too restrictive, but the intent, I think, behind all of them is universally good. But you know, how did the words on the page enact implementation? That could always be tweaked and improved. The accessory structure, perfect example. A lot of that was, all of that was unique to the Lake Wiley overlay, and it was very restrictive, certain locations, things like that. And you all took that and watered it down from what it was, and then applied it countywide to a higher standard than the countywide standard was. So now it's one uniform, improved standard. So you could take that same approach here with all of the main provisions of the Lake Wiley overlay.
I'm at a loss here. I do know, I think that I recognize a lot of folks from Lake Wiley. I would like to hear from them. If you have, anybody here have any comments that they'd like to make concerning this?
Well, the Lake Wiley overlay was creation of the community in the very beginning. And ever since then, whenever there's been changes to the overlay, it has had community support. So I would think that the community residents would have a hard time weakening those standards or lessening those standards in any shape, form, or fashion. The purpose of the small group plan was to get input from the community citizens, to provide that input, and Lake Wiley has always done that. We have the most participation of any group in the county when it comes to bringing us together to discuss what's good for the Lake Wiley area. It has to have been good for it to be expanded from the original small plan to the entire Lake Riley area. Plus, the council has been after a small plan. Watts Huckabee was talking about small area plans, how good it was to designate certain specific areas in the county from the others because we're so uniquely different. So I would have a hard time changing it without total community input.
Yes, sir.
Mark Sleep, I live down on Concord Road, District 2, Mr. Litton. If what you just said, the words get passed, then I would be 100% in there. Yeah, apply everything you've got there to the entire county. But I'm kind of skeptical that that would happen. I doubt that they're going to come back and say that it's reasonable out in Mr. Atkins' area to not have vinyl siding or some of the other more restrictive.
I'm not going to, I mean,
Well, okay.
We're not gonna have it too.
And reasonably so, because Lake Wiley's different than the outskirts. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason we moved there rather than at the edge of York County. They've been there a long time. In fact, Tom Smith, do you know Tom personally? Yeah. I have always used Tom as an example of responsible development. He's the one that helped, or he didn't start it, but as you know, he put in architectural restrictions for the developers that they agreed with. And so if you're going to put all those restrictions on the entire county, that'd be great. But what I see, and unfortunately, this is the first I've met you to call you on this, but it sounds like you're going to ask them to come back with a way to dilute that so that it will fit the entire county. And that's wrong. District 2 isn't District 6 or whatever. They have their reasons to support that. And I know you live in under the overlay, so unless you've got developers talking to you a lot, I don't know why you would support watering this down or eliminating it. Like I've heard other people tell me that you want to eliminate it, but that's why I showed up tonight. I wanted to hear from your voice. And what you just said would be great. Let's put this through the entire county, but I'm skeptical that that's really what you mean.
Haven't you said publicly that you wanted to eliminate it?
I said, we're gonna overlay it and see if we can apply it to the county. That's what I just said.
Well, that'd be great. So I just want you to know that, and I think that's what Ms. Upchurch is saying, is that those were put in after multiple community meetings. We talked about it, and District 2 overwhelmingly wanted these restrictions. So if after they come back and tell you it can't be done countywide, I hope you won't go back and say, well, then let's water it down because it's not necessary. I want you to know that the community and the residents strongly support the overlay. So please keep that in mind when you're talking about this stuff. And get out there and talk to the residents, not the developers only. That's very important.
I mean, they can look at it, but I'm not going to apply it to District 3. I mean, I value people having too much freedom for, I mean, I live on log cabin.
Which is the whole purpose, it's called district planning.
I mean, my lifestyle's different than the majority of everybody.
But this place applies to development, not your house.
Well, but it does, because as some say they don't want to see my tractors and my barns, I don't want to see. I despise high density development, you know that. I mean,
Did you read my packet?
and this, but that's like Wiley and the way them folks choose, and then you got Clover, and which And this ain't no upsetting thing, me and one to live with, but y'all heard me say before, you talking about Clover, South Carolina. Now, I got Bathsheba and all these other, and I get it, it's just a little name of where, but it's still Clover District too. And y'all have also heard me say that it'd be a good thing if Lake Wiley was to incorporate. But that's just my opinion. I got enough worries about on my side. But now I got 42% of the school district Clover, so. I mean, but I'm not gonna tell people in District 3 they can't put something vinyl siding on their house,
And I don't want to tell people in District 2 they can't put vinyl siding.
but, well,
That's
don't
up
know.
to the citizens of District Two.
but, I mean,
Okay, so,
let me say this.
okay, you go right
Th-
ahead.
This thing of we're a democracy and majority rules and all this, how it ever got started, I don't know, because we're not a democracy. We are a constitutional republic that believes strongly in individual rights. You get what I'm saying? So if somebody rides by my house and sees my entourage of all my farm trucks and decides that we're to the point that a cow can't even have a calf without people and all getting involved or looking at our hay barns, or I wish they would paint that barn and all that. But they didn't pay for the property. I paid for the property. You get what I'm saying? Now, you don't have the right to harm other people's property or do anything to devastate other people's property. So there is a protection there that I think always needs to be. But if somebody wants to live however, and generally whenever you talk about these homeowner associations, they got their own restrictions and their stuff that they follow, and if them people want to live that way, fine. But I think that government is getting too much in matters that we shouldn't necessarily get in. Now, that's my opinion.
Well,
So y'all can send it to them, but I can tell you right now, I'm not putting saying overlay of nothing on my district.
that's a special exception. Remember, I
Yeah,
told you
special
you're gonna,
exception.
you're our special exception, Tommy.
Well, you dang right, Ann, because I'll have something to eat whenever the boats want, I can tell you that.
Okay, so, to your point on the overlay, my opinion is, when people move to Lake Wiley, they know there's an overlay. They can either choose to move there with the overlay, or they can come to Fort Mill, who doesn't have an overlay. I mean, it's just, it's there, it's not, you're not hiding it
But
from people.
a lot of the people that have the overlay now didn't know they were getting the overlay. They've lived out there. Did you look at this?
That overlay went in 1989.
This overlay right here
Mhm.
got expanded like that in 2022 or whenever the free code happened. That was the overlay originally.
The original, yeah.
You see all this farmland out there?
It's like
All
40
those
some,
people?
ain't it Peggy 40 some acres now,
What?
the overlay?
40 square miles.
Miles.
Yeah,
It's,
it went from about 5 square miles to 40 square miles. All these real strict requirements went in with free code. They weren't in the original one.
Right, I've
Or
heard
even
that.
in the later versions of
We
it.
have our
So,
lovely thoughts on recode.
Well,
But-
to be fair, it was in 2019 before we
The
did. Small area.
the small area plan, but it was incorporated in the recode.
But you can remember though, when we were having another workshop in which, I even asked Allison at the time, because I asked her plain and simple, and it was about the oil change place. because I do believe in business, more so than I do residential. But, you know, I asked very pointedly, you may remember this, because I asked her, I said, how soon do those places stay busy? And she said, no, not really. But I come back and said, well, you won't have to worry about them because they won't be in business long. And the way commerce and all these different things are supposed to work is your residents decide to live that way, or your consumers who decide to, you know, go to that business. Now, that's my mindset. So that's why I would never put that. Now, I do agree with you. Some areas only need an 8-inch slam. Some areas, if we continue to let folks do what they do in wetlands and all, they might need a 2-foot slam. I mean,
No, that doesn't mean the thickness of it. This is just, you've gotta have it that far above the ground out front.
ground
Yeah.
yeah, well, still applies.
So you gotta have a
Same way.
You gotta step up into your house instead.
Yeah. I wouldn't live on no flat bottom
Gotta
house.
stand still here.
I mean, you said it, but I'm not gonna vote for it, I can tell you that. I mean, I'm not going to put any more restrictions on the people in District 3 than what they already got, because half of it's crazy now. I mean, that's my personal opinion. Nothing against it, I mean, everybody's got the
I don't
right
have
to
enough
decide.
land left to deal with that.
Well, then we'll just pick it apart one at a time, and we'll just spend a lot of time in the committee from now on.
Okay,
That'd be
so,
fine.
Well,
do we need
all
a
right, I make a
or
motion to
something?
get rid of the use overlay.
I'll make a motion to do it.
How about that?
Eliminate the overlay.
Okay, let that leave.
That was quick.
The use separation.
I think we better discuss the board.
Well, can we, well, will you vote with them to at least let them look at it and evaluate this?
Just the use separation.
All aspects of it, but not for the, we'll look at it, see what's working and what's not.
You're tossing out
No,
years.
you're talking about
Nobody
the
asked you
whole,
right now. Thank
whole
you.
overlay? Are you talking about the whole overlay or just the use separation?
The whole overlay. Send the whole, let me send the comments that I sent to y'all to read,
I
to
read
them.
them,
Or not.
because it's a lot of work for them and they've already got a lot of work ahead of them.
All right, we'll vote no then.
How does this figure into
And
the small?
we can't take any more comments. Okay. So this was what we originally wanted to do right here. Look at all of our uses and the tables, and that's gonna take a while. Your ask was at the end of the totem pole. And so he's only got so much staff and so many hours. What do you think, Tom? You're head of that department.
Well, what I think may not matter as much as what the committee thinks as a whole, but just for the sake of clarity, was your motion, Councilmember Linton, to just look at, I think it's 155, 198, is that right? The use separation clause or category, or was it to do a total review or a diagnostic, if you will, on the Lake Wiley overlay?
So that's
I
what
make a
was
motion
thinking.
to not recommend it, kill it.
Not recommending one.
Not recommend any changes to it, to this, to end the discussion of it.
Okay, I mean, because you said, you started out use separation, that's what I was confused about.
Y'all aren't gonna support anything on it, the committee's not gonna support it, so there's no sense in spending any time on it.
Well, I mean, I might say that I wouldn't support anything that I've found that was crazy. I would like to know how it did get expanded.
So the change in the boundary for the overlay was extended in 2019 to be coterminous with the Lake Wiley Small Area Plan Study. So that was in 2019, so it's remained that way ever since.
And in that basic small area plan study, I know you probably don't remember how all that went about, but I mean, did council vote unanimous on the line, or how did it?
Yeah, I don't recall specifically if it was unanimous. My gut tells me it was.
It was unanimous.
Yeah, and there were two area plans that we were working on more or less simultaneously, the I-77 South Corridor plan and the Lake Wiley Small Area Plan. So we worked on those. That was when I first got here back in 2019. So we're working on both of those simultaneously. So council was working on both of those with us at the same time. Both of those plans were adopted. The I-77 South Corridor was adopted first, then Lake Wiley. And there were some zoning code changes that came out of both of those plans that implemented them into the zoning code.
Let me ask you this, let's clarify that I've got to understand it. Did this impact individual property owners in any way?
When you mean this, do you mean the Lake Wiley overlay?
Yeah.
So,
Or did it mainly just stick with subdivisions?
So, as with anything in zoning, it only applies to anything that someone's applying to newly propose, right? So if they're wanting to build something new, a new subdivision, all of the residential standards, those only apply to major subdivisions, and there's some exemptions to that based on the timing of when it was adopted. I think it exempted preliminary plats that had already been approved, because they would require a significant revision to those. So any of those residential standards, they would only apply to brand new developments that were of 7 or more lots, essentially. The use separation would have applied to people looking to develop or sell to someone who's looking to develop some of the uses that were on that category, but otherwise it wouldn't impact anybody else. The driveway spacing similarly would affect people looking to redevelop property or significantly expand what's there based on the curb cuts that they had. You know, as you have in other places in the county, but there's certainly a lot of it on 49. You've got a lot of curb cuts and they're kind of stacked together, and it creates a unsafe situation in some circumstances, and it impedes the flow of traffic when you've got so many curb cuts.
Yeah, and I agree 100% with that, because I'd like to lessen curb cuts and go to sub-roads and have to feed off of that.
And when the accessory structure standards were in the overlay, those certainly would impact folks looking to place new sheds, and that's one that we ran into the most conflict with individual property owners on residential property, and especially for folks on the lake, where they didn't necessarily have enough room in their backyard, depending on where their house was placed, to put stuff in locations that the overlay dictated at that time.
I remember us talking about that, which I ain't got no problem with people having storage bins.
Okay, so what was your motion?
To,
I
how do
think
we
there
make
was
it go
some-
away? How do we make it go away? How we table it? It's not tabled, it's.
Yeah, it's just a discussion item on the agenda, so you don't
So we don't
need
do
to take any
anything.
action if you don't want to.
Well, it doesn't need to come up for the next one. So,
Are you gonna second that? I'll second it.
It's so again.
Okay, all in favor?
I get it. So what I do.
Okay, so is there anything else? I lost my agenda in all this paperwork.
executive
What you
session.
got? Oh, executive session?
Nothing, me.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
To adjourn?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay.